So today, before we begin the class on understanding poetry, let me read out a very interesting postmodern poem to you by Tom Clark. It is not a famous poem, and that's the best part about postmodern poetry. It lurks in the shadows of infamy. Then and now, that's the name of the poem. Then it was always, for now, later, for later. And then years of now passed and it grew later and later. Trapped in the shrinking chocolate box, the confused sardine was unhappy. It leaped and banged its head again, and afterwards they said, "Shall we repeat the experiment?" And it said, "Later for that." So it's a short poem, makes no sense at all. Shrunk in the trapped chocolate box, the confused sardine. All of us, let me just give you an example of my interpretation of a certain excerpt of this poem by Clark, is that trapped and stuffed in a chocolate box, the confused sardine. All of us in our lives are being asked to be people whom we are not, and we are trapped and shut in these boxes, confused. Who are we supposed to project? The person who we actually are, the person who the world wants to see, the person who we think we are. So the entire problem is that we live in a perception of ourselves. Now, in these three sentences, stuffed in a chocolate box, the confused sardine, there's a plethora of explanations that can be given, and that is the entire enigma of postmodern studies as well as poetry. It does this very delicate balance between holding meaning and holding mundane in the act of togetherness. And it talks about the fact that why cannot sardine also be a topic of poetry? Why is it that huge, lofty, noble emotions can only be a part of something as beautiful as poetry? Everything can be converted to a poem if we just see the intensity behind what we are trying to say, what the poet is trying to say. Once the poet is done with his work, what the reader is trying to assess from the poet's work is an intensive job, and poetry scatters the wings of meanings far and wide because it can be interpreted any which way. All right. So let's move on to what I was telling you about modern poetry. We spoke about Gerard Manley Hopkins, the priest who gave us a sprung rhythm, and in a sprung rhythm, I gave you an excerpt of it as well. Further, the writer says, one might draw an analogy similarity between the reader of modern verse and the child learning to read. The child, as educators know, can understand words he cannot use and can read words he cannot spell. So the cultivated reader feels meanings in a poem that he cannot reformulate in his own words. Of course, we cannot ever reformulate a poem successfully. Coleridge's test of a poem still holds. It must be untranslatable into words of the same language without injury to the meaning. Samuel Taylor Coleridge was an excessively famous romantic delusionist writer. One of the major reasons why he achieved a lot of fame in his lifetime is because he was said to have given the modern poet his image of someone who is high on drugs, dreams every night of his poem, gets up in the morning and in a very drug-induced state writes his poems. So S.T. Coleridge, look him up, he's had an interesting life to say the least. Coleridge spoke about the fact how poetry and imagination are so enmeshed within each other that one cannot hold true without the other giving him a rock-solid pillar of understanding and meaning. And Coleridge also wrote one of the first manifestos of modern poetry. It was called Biographia Literaria. During his times, it wasn't much read, but as Eliot confirmed, he disliked the Romantics, but he loved Coleridge's Biographia Literaria, where the imagination is given the term of sublime. Sublime is that which thrills you with fear. It thrills you with the fear of its enormity and vastness. So it's a concept that Coleridge gave. If you're standing at the peak of a mountain and you look down below, it's a feeling of sublime. Poetry, therefore, for Coleridge in Biographia Literaria, is a feeling of sublime. And his definition of a good poetry, of a good poem, is that it cannot be converted into sentence formulations in the same language without some or the other injury to the meaning. And he goes about it in a round-way manner. What he's trying to say is it cannot be translated completely. Nobody can translate a poem and say this is exactly what the poet is trying to say, because poetic diction is such that if converted into plain prose, it loses its meaning itself. So modern poetry is a complete example of it. It's stuffed in a chocolate box, confused sardine. Sardine is a non-living eatable item. How is it confused? So is it the chocolate box which is confused, the chocolates in the box that are confused, or the sardine which is not kept in the chocolate box that is confused? Well, the confusion is human. It is just thrust upon inanimate objects. It is again a figure of poetic speech called affective fallacy. Affective fallacy is a tool which writers use through which they give inanimate objects animated feelings, human feelings and emotions, what you know in very imperfect English figures of speech of personification. It's called affective fallacy in the poetic diction. So it's a very interesting similarity that he gives, that reading poetry is like teaching a small child to learn how to read. The child knows, the educators who are teaching the child knows that he cannot understand the words and he does not know what to do with them, and yet he's being made to read them, spell them, learn them, because it is expected that somewhere later in life he will be using them. So modern poetry is akin to that. For a poem, in much more than its prose sense, music and imagery, working together, convey an emotion, an idea, a vision, or in Walfrey's phrase, a modality of being that is wholly harmonious, that illuminates experience and that may recognize the reader's attitudes. Indeed, the hostility to much new verse is partly owing to a resentment against having accustomed attitudes disturbed. The anomaly is that the contemporary poet, who often speaks in so private a fashion, is eager to present a new point of view, a new faith. A lot of hallmarks of modern poetry is about charting new territories and thwarting the older ones. It is about finding new boundaries for poems, because it has been felt that for far too long poetry as a genre of literature has been held and chained in too much of formalistic stylistic rules and techniques, and it has not been available to the common reader to try his hand at writing poem. And therefore, a lot of times the elitist class says that poetry has now left its charm, or it no longer has its mark or point to prove. But it is actually because people who are accustomed to their zones of comfort in terms of poetry are now being dislodged from those very comfort zones, and poetry has started to speak on subjects and situations, circumstances about which it wasn't speaking about before. Another thing is, it makes people very uncomfortable when poetry does not on the face of it talk about very disillusionizing things, but just guides the reader towards what the poet or what the poem is leading towards. And therefore the poet, neither the poem can be in totality be blamed for what it is insinuating or trying to insinuate, that is trying to say. Where it leads the reader is the very zone of grey, which the society does not wish for an individual to reach. I have always given you an example of Foucault's, the French writer and philosopher Foucault, his path-breaking essay on modernity and madness, where Foucault questions that where the hell and why the hell does the definition of madness change as society progresses? Isn't it like a very powerful tool in the hands of those who have the power to subjugate those elements which can cause rebellion as mad, and therefore relegate these elements to the boundary of society so that they do not cause an uprising or unrest amongst those who are following the established order with their heads down with slave-like mentality. Poetry is that insidious challenge to our comfort zones. Poetry is that tool or the weapon which is utilized by people who are trying to find new way and new voices to talk about atrocities that poetry has not been allowed to discuss so far. And to prove my point, I will give you one of my favorite poems by one of my favorite writers. It might make certain, it has in the past made a lot of readers and writers uncomfortable with how amazing Maya Angelou is when talking about women. But, well, you know me, I'm known to like strange things. It's a poem which is called Phenomenal Woman, and in the beginning it sounds, yes, all nice and feminist, but towards the end it really grows to the brink of bizarre. Pretty women wonder where my secret lies. I'm not cute or built to suit a fashion model's size, but when I start to tell them, they think I'm telling lies. I say, it's in the reach of my arms, the span of my hips, the stride of my step, the curl of my lips. I'm a woman phenomenally. Phenomenal woman, that's me. I walk into a room just as cool as you please, and to a man, the fellows stand or fall down on their knees. Then they swarm around me, a hive of honey bees. I say, it's the fire in my eyes and the flash of my teeth, the swing in my waist and the joy in my feet. I am a woman phenomenally. Phenomenal woman, that's me. Men themselves have wondered what they see in me. They try so much, but they can't touch my inner mystery. When I try to show them, they say they still can't see. I say it's in the arch of my back, the sun of my smile, the ride of my breasts, the grace of my style. I'm a woman phenomenally, phenomenal woman, that's me. Now you understand just why my head's not bowed. I don't jump or shout or have to talk real loud. When you see me passing, it ought to make you proud. I say, it's in the click of my heels, the bend of my hair, the palm of my hand, the need for my care. 'Cause I'm a woman phenomenally. Phenomenal woman, that's me. This is one of those most barest form of when women talk about women abuse combined with women dignity. So when Angelou talks about the physicality of women, she also reiterates the abuse that women have gone through, the very physicality of their being. And Angelou is again one of those writers who established the cult of postmodern poetry. So if you can look her up and read her poems, you will understand this concept a lot better. That's it for today. We will continue by this article in the next class.